Welcome to Hollis Does Brunch. I'm hella excited to be kicking off kind of this next phase of Hollis Does Brunch, which is focusing on the intersection of art and activism in our current time. And I'm going to be having an incredible all-star roster today from folks that are based in DC. So for us, I think all of us know the important role that art plays and creative expression plays in social movements. And I think now more than ever, it's really important to highlight and to amplify the folks that are on the ground, making the art, doing the work, and how that's connected to, the broader social movement building. And so, yeah, focusing on DC, I think there's been a lot about DC in the news, a lot about DC's art and how that intersects with protesting in the news. And obviously for those of us that aren't there, it's hella important to be able to connect with the people who are, to better understand how we can be of support, to better understand what movement organizing and sustainability is looking like, and to connect. And we're also going to be raising money today for a really dope organization called Until Freedom, which we'll hear a little bit more about. But without further ado, I would love to introduce you to a dear friend of mine, Aerica Shimizu Banks, who I met when we were both going to college in Seattle. And she now is based in DC and is an accomplished and really incredible speaker, strategist, creative, and also during COVID has become the most incredible baker. So please welcome to our stream, Aerica Shimizu Banks. Hey, Aerica.
Hey.
How's it going?
Hollis, thanks for hosting DC and letting us take over your brunch.
Absolutely.
We're excited about it. And I actually did bake something for brunch.
Yes.
So
what is it? Please share more about your creation.
It's a blueberry honey yogurt tart.
Amazing.
So, probably more like dessert, but who cares in quarantine, right?
So, Aerica, could you share a little bit about yourself and, what brought you to DC, how you came to call DC home, and maybe just like a little teaser about what you've been doing and seeing on the ground there?
Sure. So I've been in DC on and off for the last 10 years, which is crazy. I literally moved to DC graduation night in 2010. To work in policy. So my background is in environmental policy. I was a community organizer for environmental justice in Seattle. Environmental justice takes a look at racism and how it's applied to environmental issues and public health issues related to the environment. So taking that experience, I went to DC because I wanted to affect change at the national level. Ended up in the Obama administration as a political appointee, working on environmental issues through the Office of Management and Budget. And then I left DC for a little while to get my master's at Oxford in environmental policy, but couldn't find a job during the government shutdown of 2013. So then pivoted to tech, and I've been in tech now for the last 7 years. I worked at Google for a long time, and that's truly where my activism took off. I just don't want to claim any credit whatsoever for being a part of, the Black Lives Matter movement and the amazing, incredible, groundbreaking work that these amazing activists have done, because they've really, inspired all of us. And I think I was just inspired by that to do what I could where I was. And that meant starting equity programs at Google and the legal department. That meant sharing my story about how police brutality has affected my family, being that I'm Black and Japanese. I have experienced, all sides of things, from being the fly on the wall when people don't realize that I have a tie to my Black community, to seeing firsthand the brutality of police and the inequity, meted against Black people in this country and abroad. So I took that to Google, and we started a bunch of programs and spent almost $1 million on my team alone to combat this issue in IP and in our community. I was the Black small business liaison for Google in DC for almost 5 years. And that is how I met the amazing folks that we'll be having on the show today. Their reputations definitely precede them and precede me in many ways. So having that role was amazing, in getting in touch with the creative community in DC. And when a lot of people think of DC, especially for the last 4 years, you might think of the federal, government. but there is a vibrant, awake, alive, and active city and creative community beyond the federal government in DC. And so I always try to highlight that wherever I can and let the people know about how dope DC is and how different we are from what you see on the news.
Absolutely. That's so awesome. Well, without much further ado, I would love to bring all of the guests that you have lovingly curated that really do demonstrate that breadth and the vitality of DC's creative scene to the forefront. So please welcome on our guests. We have Kokayi, we have Kelcie Glass, aka At the Fire, and then we have incredible artists Trap Bob and Domo. Hey everybody.
What's up?
How's it going? What's up?
Hey, yo.
Hey, thanks y'all so much for being down to connect with us here. I'm really excited to get into it, both to understand more about y'all's art practice, as well as just generally what both kind of like the temperature check on what's happening on the ground in DC, where you see the work headed, and how folks that aren't necessarily in the city can better support the creatives that are pushing things forward. So why don't we start it off with Ms. Trap. Just let us know how you're doing, what you're eating, and a little bit about yourself. Oh, you're muted.
I had like a little line and it got muted out, but it's okay. So happy to be here. Like you said, Trap Bob, an artist in DC. I've been practicing for about 5 to 6 years, self-taught after graduating with a marketing degree from University of Maryland, and really just didn't have any passion for any field or any job, and just started drawing to get some relief, and ended up completely falling in love with it, changing my life and committing to art, and especially using my voice and being a representative as a Black woman artist. When I was starting out, I mean, the position that I'm in and a lot of artists and just the creative scene didn't exist. There wasn't really anything to look to, or it was very hard to find mentorship to figure out the direction. But for me, a lot of it came from my beliefs and my values and the messages that I wanted to spread. So I kind of just stuck to that aspect of it and just shared work and kept growing and getting opportunities that I could further represent not only myself, but DC on a larger scale. And just touching on what Aerica was talking about, a lot of times people see DC and think of the politics and, you know, a lot of the boring stuff, but we really have the most amazing creative scene here. And I think right now we're really in a creative renaissance. So I feel blessed to even be able to build my career during this time and have a hand in it. So that's, you know, what I've been doing for the past good couple of years. Started my own LLC, Trap Bob World. I freelance through there and do different projects. I've been working with Girla for the past 2 years. Love Girla so much. And I'll let everybody else, we'll get into that later, but been doing creative direction and creating art for different events and programming we've done. And then as of recently with the protests, I've done 2 murals, and I'll get into that later too.
Yeah, I'm extremely hyped to hear more about Gorilla and how that collective came to be, because it kind of sounds like when you got started, there wasn't like a infrastructure. So like most artists do, you have to build your own in order to find support. So to that end, I would love to hear from you, Kelcie, in terms of what your journey has been to where you're at now, and all that. So please.
Cool. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I could jump off from the Girla side of things. We kind of came together in this one space. We were all working in different avenues. Domo and Main Squeeze, one of our other founding members, are heavily in the creative scene music-wise. Trap was doing her illustration. We had worked with Trap before. And I'm in the marketing and digital strategy space. And we kind of just came together, and it made the most sense for us to have a platform where we're amplifying the work of women who are not censored a lot. And that's women of color, specifically Black women. So a lot of my work leans and supports Black women outside outside of Girla, I have my own marketing firm where 50% of my clients are women of color who are small business owners, where I can lean support and marketing expertise to for very low cost. And then the other 50% of my clients are progressive organizations who do have budget to sustain me, but have platforms that I respect and agree with. So I work with a lot of unions. I work with workers' rights organizations, and a lot of things have to do with equality in workplaces. So yeah, I'm really in the progressive space. It makes the most sense. I feel like as a Black woman, I don't have a choice to not be. And if I have a skill set, I think it's really important to offer and lean into spaces where we need that support the most. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. And I think that's so interesting. I think right now, like what you say, it's like you don't have a choice to not be doing the work with the folks, like whether it's artists or union organizers. And that's really who is at the forefront right now, currently, in this current wave of civil rights movement. So cool. I'd love to pass it over to you, Domo, as another artist as part of the Guerrilla Collective. So if you could just share a little bit about yourself and what's poppin'.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I've had definitely a weird journey in the space that I'm in. I don't think that any of us also would call ourselves activists more than we just care about these issues. And like Kelcie and Trapo said, just felt like we didn't really have the option to not get involved. Personally, I also came from an environmental background, kind of like Aerica. I used to work for the Department of Energy for almost 7 years, actually, and spent most of my studies in environmental and sustainability policy. So I was working for the Department of Energy during Obama's administration as well. And I used to support the Secretary of Energy, Moniz, and our undersecretary until I left. And I was always doing creative work and supporting especially creative women part-time. But then once I was ready to leave the federal government, I was leaning into DJing full-time, which I started doing that work before. Like I was DJing part-time, and then I quit the full-time job 2 years ago, and then have been doing this full-time ever since, and started Guerrilla the same year. And, brought together all the women that I know that do amazing things, and we just continue to work together. So yeah, I work full-time as a DJ, and newly added as a professional anyway, illustrator. And Guerrilla is our agency arm, where we do a lot of work supporting different clients in various spaces in art and music.
That's awesome. Thank you. And could you just say really quickly, I mean, if you went to full-time DJing and then COVID hit, like how has that been for you as a working DJ now that every bar is shut down?
Well, I don't work in bars, but I do a lot of major events. So yeah, I'm shut down just like everything else is shut down. Anything that requires like massive gatherings of people, that's where I would be. So South by Southwest. So something in the Water Festival in DC. We have Broccoli City Festival, all the festivals. Like I do a lot of festivals, do a lot of large scale events for like, major companies and organizations. So all of that's been halted. Some of them have pivoted to digital events, but it's still not the same scale. It's definitely not the same money. It's a total pivot in energy too. It's just not the same.
Yeah, I feel that for sure. As a musician and a performer, as soon as things started shutting down, I was like, okay, like the pivot needs to happen. So it's dope that you're able to have the Guerrilla Collective and your work as an illustrator to sustain your creative momentum during this time, which is a great transition to you, Kokayi, as a working artist as well. As a prolific musician, would love to get your intro to yourself and how things have been for you over the last 3 months.
For sure. I'm a Washington, D.C. native. Been doing music for over 20 years. Grammy nominated. Have traveled over to 56 countries. Been working in this space, in the music and art space, for a long time. I was a Housing On Fellow 2 years ago, creating a project around Black masculinity and its reaction or interaction with society overall. Released a number of different projects, all supporting that type of work. And just like Dom said, I don't consider myself an activist. There are just things that I believe in that I put into my music, that I've always put into my music. and consistently talk about that affect Black people overall. My last cohesive project was an EP called Living While Black, which was a direct reaction to Ahmaud Arbery being murdered. And then thinking about the aggressions and microaggressions that happen with Black people all of the time, and what it's like to breathe as a Black person and to walk around as a Black person. The effect of COVID, it's a wild thing. As a creative, when you are about this life and you're about the spontaneity that happens with music or art or anything that's creative, our ability to pivot is a little different. Because we've been working in the electronic and digital space for a long time, it really wasn't hard personally for me to move things online. Because that's pretty much how I've been working anyway. And if you have an independent mindset, a hustle mindset, you know that there's wares and things. All you got to do is create something. And this is what we do as creatives. We just continually create. So that is how I've been able to work. A lot of the, just like Dom, a lot of the stuff that I do is international and festivals. So all of my tours got canceled. I was supposed to be at Big Ears in Nashville. That's gone. I was supposed to do a tribute to Wayne Shorter out in LA. And then I had a tour from April to June that I was supposed to be in Europe doing. And all of that is gone. But in the meantime, I've been making a lot of work, just creating in my house and actually learning how to sit still. So learning how to sit still is a great thing for me.
I hear that for sure. I think for me as a musician as well, the idea of like constantly being in motion, whether that's be on tour or like going and doing writing sessions or going to the studio, the idea of that momentum really like defined me personally as an artist. And then now in this kind of lapse, it's like, what am I actually creating? And what is my pace of life? So I hella relate with that. So I'm going to bring everybody on really quick.
Go ahead. About what I've been eating. So I made,
yes, please.
I made guacamole this morning, which was a dope little guacamole that I put together. And I'm a pescatarian, so I don't eat a lot of. I did a little bit of salmon in a salad this morning with apples and pears. Boom.
Awesome. I love that. What else is everybody eating up for brunch currently? What do we have served up?
I have avocado too. I have some avocado toast. I ate half of it. I'm vegan. I eat fish though. I just don't say I'm pescatarian because then everyone like assumes you want to eat fish. But I love salmon. But I'm mostly like just plants. And have some fruit.
Awesome. Who else?
Yogurt and fruit.
Yogurt and fruit.
I'm about to eat soon. My girlfriend just got me some Caribbean food, so I'm gonna have some curry shrimp. But I don't have much of an appetite yet, so I'm chilling right now.
Fair enough. And then we got Aerica with her gorgeous tart.
I'm about to get into this.
Oh yes. Please, hold on. Solo.
Jealous.
Fancy.
We love to see it. I'm actually up in Seattle right now, and so we went to this Fuji bakery. They got these ube malasadas that I'm about to get into. It's about to be a sugar hit, but we know what it is. So cool. Well, I would love to hear a little bit more about Gurla from the three collective members that we have right now, and specifically just like kind of what the origin story is. I think y'all already said, like, at least Trap, when you started out, like there wasn't really an infrastructure, there wasn't mentorship. So how did the collective come to be, and what is the mission of the collective?
I'll just kind of touch on how I got brought in, kind of my perspective as an artist, and then I'll let DOMO and Kelcie get into the more overarching way we came together. Personally, I've never really worked in any collectives, been a part of any groups. I've always been very solo with my practice. And I just look for places that I can go and kind of bring my influence, but also bring light to the message that maybe the organization or the person is trying to touch on. And I really enjoy just bringing people's ideas to life. So I've always been able to just hop in, do a project and leave. And again, always bringing in the message of just representing the Black community, Black women, and making room for us. So this was like 2 years ago. I was still just freelancing. I had done like one project with DOMO, and we kind of met that way, working together. And then she approached me about Gurla, and really just told me it was women-centric, to make space for us, to create a safe space. And a lot of the things she was saying, I realized just didn't exist anywhere. And I'd never even considered it. So for the first time, I was like excited to just be a part of something that was bigger than me, because I felt like it was at that point in my career as well that I didn't want to just create art to, you know, represent myself and just grow my career. I want to make an impact. And I really believe art will save the world. So I felt it was a perfect fit and it just made sense. So we did like our first party, and it was really amazing to actually see what a safe space could look like in a party scene, because being at the first party, I really realized I'd never been to something that I was so comfortable at. And the energy was like, it was just brand new. We didn't have anything like it in the area. And at that point I was like, I'm 100% in, totally committed. And what I really love about our group is how everybody is so committed and just passionate about what we're standing for. And then I'll let DOMO and Kelcie take it from there.
Kelcie, you want to go?
I'm sure, yeah, I can go. I think, so I already had a friendship with DOMO, and actually Trap used to work a lot with Main Squeeze and Mr. Selecta for their graphics, so I already was very familiar with her work. And DOMO approached me one day. Originally, it started off as a safe space party concept, and she was like, I want to bring girls who are in this space. Can you lean in on the marketing side? And like, let's just center Black women DJs, Black women illustrators and artists, and just have this party that makes us feel welcome and makes us feel like we're being highlighted. And we quickly learned after that launch that there was a void in other ways where we can provide agency and service. So quickly after that, Trap and DOMO did a speaking engagement at the Smithsonian. And we just kept getting this outreach from organizations and from entities that needed support connecting with Black women and wanted to amplify Black women. And we realized that we can be a hub for opportunity. So I love being able to hit up other creative Black women and say, hey, this organization reached out to us. This is their budget, and they're looking to have someone like you be a part of it. And just kind of continuing to center women and amplifying their work, and also making sure they get paid and compensated, because that's a whole nother conversation about how, you know, Black women aren't fairly compensated for their work. So Guerrilla has become a huge part of the work that I do. And I'm just excited that we're continuing to grow, and we're growing closer as well.
I think that the girls have covered most of the points of how it began. I wanted to start Guerrilla for just all those reasons said. Basically, as a DJ, like just starting out, I was frustrated with a lot of the social spaces that were targeted towards my demographic, but didn't include me. A lot of them were led by men that weren't really upholding the integrity of what it meant to have us in their space, which I found frustrating. A lot of times felt unsafe, or felt just like I just didn't appreciate their approach. It lacked integrity, it lacked intention, it lacked aesthetic, which I care about all of those things. So I just felt like I needed to stop trying to nudge men in a direction and just do it ourselves. And essentially that's what started our first party series, and how we were going to fuse art and music in a new way with you know, all the values that we wanted to uphold. And ultimately it led us down, you know, a bunch of different paths where paths of just making up words, paths where we, you know, work with the Kennedy Center, we've worked with the Hirshhorn, we've worked with Broccoli City, we've worked with a bunch of different entities, local and beyond, that have seen the value in what we're doing. And ultimately, like we've pivoted from just being, you know, people that do events to being programmers, and to basically turning Guerrilla into an agency, whereas we just started as an event series. So I'm very thankful for these women, because they've been critical in, you know, us being able to do the work that we do, because it's not just about one person. And for me, it was also about that, because I wanted to create the community that I had looked for, you know, when I was starting out, or back when, you know, before I even had become a DJ, just when I was looking for social spaces that were more intentional that didn't exist. So I just wanted to stop like looking for them and just be the things that we were always searching for. And we've really done that in a lot of ways. I think that we do hit a lot of roadblocks, and we try to figure it out. And most of the time we do. It's not easy work, but we're thankful for the opportunities and the people that have really believed in us when they didn't have to, and just trusted us. So it's been a great 2 years with this team. We had some things planned for this year that we've had to halt. But hopefully we'll be able to pick back up next year and go from there.
So dope. Thank you. I think, yeah, it's hella inspirational just to hear about how, you know, like y'all came together for a need, because it was a space that didn't exist. I mean, starting with safe space is everything, right? But the fact that you were organically able to grow as multidisciplinary creatives to become an agency, essentially, that was based off your creative work is highly inspirational and really awesome. So I would love Trap Bob and Domo for you guys to talk a little bit more about the work that you're doing currently. We have some of your work samples up that I'll share, but you know, would love to hear some about like Trap Bob, the street murals and the arts for protests that you've been working on, and Domo, you know, in addition to your work as like a DJ, I'd love to hear more about the hashtag Don't Mute DC. And Long Live Go-Go as well. So I'll bring these art pieces up, and you guys can just share more about that.
Yeah, so I just completed 2 street murals on the panels that a lot of the downtown establishments are using to cover up their windows, just to protect from looting. And they wanted to just put a positive message instead of just having plywood lying there. And again, I really believe art will change the world, and it's the best way to get a message out to people, because it gives people an opportunity to kind of reflect on not only the art, but how they feel, and really figure out if, you know, there is an issue that they need to feel more passionate about, or if they need to change their views. I think it's a very non-intrusive way to kind of reason with somebody and make them think. And I'm also really big on just adding some light to people's lives and their day. I really think, especially now, we just consume so much content, and we have to think about so many things constantly. We really don't get a break. So even when I post my illustrations on my Instagram, I just want to kind of lighten the timeline and give somebody a second to stop and put a smile on their face. So being able to have these artworks out publicly in the street that can represent themselves when I'm not physically there is great. I've had so many people just taking pictures in front of them and tagging me and writing beautiful like captions and expressing how it made them feel. And even just kids with their families stopping to take pictures with their protest signs. I really love it. And it also kind of gives me assurance and an idea of what people are feeling and what the overall energy is outside. So with these 2 murals, I wanted to send a very clear message of the direction that we're going and where I see the world, you know, in the future, whether it be in my lifetime or not. I just really want to remind people to keep fighting, even if we're in the midst of all this darkness. We always have our own power, and we always have the opportunities to use those powers, whether it's through art, whether it's through protesting, whether it's through donating, having, you know, even just this podcast here. We have so many forms of expression that we can use.
Hollis, do you want me to start? Yeah. Yeah, I with this defund police, I think that people get a lot of confused messages about what it means. And I care about it a lot because I do believe that most of our police departments are way overfunded. And I think that, you know, it enables them to do the destruction that they do. So for me, I've cared about that messaging and about putting that forward so that people, you know, not just locally, but whomever, because I know that my platform largely engages DMV, but definitely has people outside of that. So even if it's just reaching a few, to understand like what it means to defund the police, and how like it doesn't necessarily mean abolishing them. However, that's on the spectrum, but just knowing that like taking away funding is a step, and that's what we should be advocating for until they're able to reform what they're doing. So I've been projecting that messaging, and this was just an image that I had done that ultimately has been repurposed for posters and everything else. We're actually in the midst of collaborating with another political group who we're going to put together some images for that are promoting different values as far as like, you know, defunding the police, reforming, you know, the jail institution, and just other like public values. So we're doing that, and yeah, that's what this one is obviously about with this broken down police car.
Awesome. Yeah. And then do you want to share a little bit more about your work with hashtag Don't Mute DC or Long Live GoGo?
So I am not affiliated to any one or particular of those groups. I definitely was supporting the work last spring and summer. So Don't Mute DC was, if people whomever's like watching this are not familiar, you should definitely just type that in Google real quick. You'll find a bunch of articles from a bunch of major platforms that just talked about the uprising in DC around go-go music, and how you know, essentially gentrification led to an uprising in the city. And go-go music was the face of it, but it wasn't the only issue. And it's kind of the same things that we're upset about now. Essentially, like with Native Washingtonians being pushed out of the city for years, and how, you know, this rush of new people really doesn't value the culture that comes from the city. So I would definitely encourage anyone to do some research on that campaign, because we did a lot of work to shine a light on go-go music specifically, but also like the issues that really led to the frustration and the uprising, because that's essentially what that was. It was people who really showed that this is about the music, but also so much more, and just about like this ultimate systemic oppression of people in the city, and how it just continues to happen. So yeah, I was definitely working in the background with a lot of the people who were doing the work around Don't Mute DC last year, and trying to really just put them in a place strategically to get some of the things done on a higher level. So I was right there. That's yeah, I don't think we have enough time to talk about that, but
Yeah, no, that's real. I mean, and just pointing towards like the idea of folks that move into cities and don't have any basic appreciation or understanding of what the culture is that they're moving into. And yeah, so I'm excited to dig into that more and understand it. I think that's a great transition actually to Kokayi, as somebody who has been working as a working musician, DC native. So it'd be great to hear about your relationship to go-go music and your own art practice in the city.
Go-go music is the foundation for everything that I've done. I mean, I grew up in Southwest, on the southeast side, east of the river, Ward 8. Um, so it's been part of my DNA since I've been here, since I was born here, and has informed me in a lot of the things that I've done. Go-go music is like, it's the backbone, it's the lifeblood of the city. It's also one of the very few indigenous art forms that were created in the city, similar to Second Line that you have in New Orleans or Zydeco music. DC has go-go, which is a direct influence from African culture and syncopated music. Um, and so, you know, that one thing is a cultural, the indelible cultural memory that is here in the city. Informs everybody that lives in the city, because go-go music ain't going nowhere. Even if you have a proliferation of hip hop, R&B, punk rock, electronic music, it doesn't matter what you do. Go-go is still at the forefront and in the lifeblood of people that come from this area. And so that it definitely is a form of my practice. It informs my art, and informs everything that I do. And I like to touch on what Dom was talking about. You know, the deeper issue is that when you have people that don't culturally understand or understand culture, or don't care to understand culture. When they move into a city, they seek the silence, and they seek to silence not only the residents that are in the city, but they also seek to silence the art. That's why you have a proliferation of people believing that DC is just a political city, and they don't focus on the artists and the great art that comes out of the city, because they want one specific type of narrative to come out of the city. This was a majority black city. This is what it is. It's still Chocolate City, a little latte now, but it's still Chocolate City. And don't get it twisted. Like, we still are here. And so that's, that's how we kind of operate. That's how I operate. That's part of my ethos, is making sure that we maintain and continue to keep our voice. People have stolen go-go if you're not hip to, how Salt and Pepper, Jill Scott. I mean, not stolen. I would just say borrow. Let's just say borrow. Um, People have borrowed go-go music, and it's been within the soundtrack of a lot of hip-hop music that came out of New York early on. Herbie Lovebug was definitely listening to some old go-go tapes. Sardines and Pork and Beans by Junkyard Band came out on Def Jam. People don't realize it wasn't just here in the city; it was throughout the world. Trouble Funk is one of the best known bands. Had a huge influence on Dave Grohl, so much so that he throws Big Tony a party every year, birthday party every year. So these
Yeah.
are the things that continue to be um, part of what this city is about, and so we're not going nowhere. Um,
See that.
that's
That's
pretty much
dope.
short of that.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I know that Domo had a little bit that she wanted to share as well to add on to that.
Yeah, I appreciated what Kokai mentioned as far as like it being one of our native regional sounds, because this is not a thing that we're the only ones combating, because New Orleans did go through an issue where people were challenging their second line. And it's also just the recognition, right? Because what happens is a lot of mainstream artists will pull from these regional sounds, and the world may not know where they come from, and that's important. Like Jill Scott has sampled go-go music, Amerie, Beyonce, like many mainstream artists, and even though they know where it comes from, the people abound don't. And it's just as important, and to recognize, like, Chopped and Screwed that comes out of Texas, or that trap music comes out of Atlanta, and all of these sounds, or that Chicago house, and even Baltimore and Jersey club. Like, that's how these sounds, like, a lot of times get either whitewashed, because that's happened a lot with house music and club music.
Amen.
Yeah, and how mainstream artists can pull reference without really giving credit where it's due. So that's why it's so important for us to keep our music alive and where it comes from. That's really why I play go-go for a lot of reasons, because I grew up in it. I grew up in go-go's. I was in a go-go club every weekend from the ages of like 13 up until high school. So it's really like, it gives me joy to play it. It's really a totally different
Right.
energy versus like the other music that I play, because it's so embedded and ingrained in me. But I also, because I've seen it not get the same attention over the years, because strategically the music had been pushed out of the city. Clubs were banned, licenses were taken from go-go clubs so that they couldn't have them in the city anymore, and they really criminalized the music, which wasn't really fair. Even though I can admit that bad things were happening, especially in my era of go-go music.
Mm.
I will say that there was a shift in the bounce beat era, and at the time when I was in high school and we were going, like, I will say that there was an uptick around like maybe violence that happened in those venues, but it shouldn't have criminalized the music itself, and that's what made it unfair, and essentially like made it not as accessible to the next generation, and why we don't see it as engaged with the current kids now, for multiple reasons. Like, they don't have it in their schools. They don't have music programming the way they used to maybe 10 or 15 years ago. And then on top of like all of the things that used to give them access, like there used to be kiddie clubs when I was young. You could go to a firehouse on a weekend, and they would throw little kiddie go-go's with the young kid go-go bands that you would be done by 10 p.m. Like the party was over at 10, but you still could get it. You could get that access, and then it encouraged those kids to want to play instruments, and to want to learn the drums, and to want to sing the front line, and to want to understand the pocket. And it showed them that there's a current generation that they could tap into while respecting their history, and not only having one reference from Junkyard or Backyard Band. So this same thing happens in every other city where there's a Black genre of music where it originates. We're not the only ones. We're just the current one, right? And I think that's why we fight so hard, or we work so hard to try to like bring it to the forefront. Literally, and anytime I do a set or I have an opportunity to play go-go or to talk about it, then I do, because if I'm ever in front of people that aren't aware, then they can learn something.
Right. Part of that criminalization was so that they can pave way for gentrification.
Exactly.
So if I could keep the lifeblood of the music out of the city, then I can also push those residents out of the city. The further away that go-go got away from the city, the further we can push these residents away from the city and make way for people that don't look like us. I had a long talk with Rico Love, who is a producer. You've heard of more Usher stuff, and Rico's been doing a lot of stuff in Miami. But Rico went to school at FAM with a bunch of folks from DC, and he was like, "Yo, I just want to make sure that if I want to get a go-go sound from one of my artists, how do I tap in?" And I was like, come to the go-go artist directly. Don't go to somebody. Don't have somebody recreate the beat. Just tap in with the groups themselves, and that way we can start to create publishing and revenue streams for artists that come from here. And I think that's part of making sure that go-go stays too, is making it financially lucrative for the artists that are involved.
Yeah, and it's also like you have to. I think one thing that Tony Lewis like mentioned to me that always stuck with me last year was you can't protect a culture without protecting the people. And that comes down to like some of the basic things. Like if Black people have been by and large pushed out of the city over the last 10 years, how can we protect a culture that's ultimately rooted in the presence of Black people?
Right.
You know, where they can't even afford to live in the city anymore. There's not enough affordable housing. There are no pipelines to jobs and programs. There's a lot of the things that I want to say. I don't know if this is was this Marion Barry who really like was helping facilitate, you know, social programs that protected the people. Because that's also critical. We can't have one without the other. So as much as like we can say like protect the culture, what we're really saying is protect the people to keep the culture.
Right. Yeah. Amen.
Word. Thank you guys so much. That was such an awesome breakdown. I'm bringing everybody up now, just so we can all be in our little Brady Bunch moment. But thank you, Domo and Kokayi, for you're like, hey. But I appreciate y'all so much for saying that. I think that sentiment is so real. Like, you can't protect culture without protecting the people. And I think that speaks to the reason why art and activism are so intrinsically linked. Before we get into a larger group conversation, I know that Aerica wants to kick off kind of a conversation about how art shows up in social movements and how that happens authentically and not performatively, as I think a lot of the conversation has happened right now. Kelcie, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about Until Freedom, the organization that we're raising money for today. And there's a link if you want to donate in the YouTube description, and then you can also donate with my Venmo that is streaming below. But yeah, Kelcie, let us know a little bit about Until Freedom, and then we're gonna get into it.
Sure, absolutely. So Until Freedom is an organization that Tamika Mallory co-founded. She is one of the co-founders of the Women's March as well. And I've just been following her since the Women's March kicked off, but she's been on the ground for decades. And it's one of my favorite organizations to share with people when they ask, what should I be supporting? Where should I donate? Because I believe that they allocate their resources to where they are needed. So it is at the intersection of many social justice movements, obviously police brutality, but women's rights, racial inequality in the workforce, and just systematic oppression overall. And so I think that they're great because they are actively a part of all these movements and put money when it's needed and where it's needed immediately. So whether that's a bail fund today or tomorrow, helping to pay some of the organizers who are on the front lines at these cities, providing them with resources to help protesters be comfortable and be safe. So I think that they're a great go-to for if you're not sure or if you're interested in a bunch of different things. They'll allocate the money to the right places, and they've been on the ground for decades. So it's not new to them, and they're really experienced with activism and being on the front lines.
That's dope. Thank you so much. And I think, yeah, seeing the ways in which organizations can be adaptive to the moment is so important. So it's amazing that we can be together today. Please, if you're tuning in, we appreciate it. And if you could hit us with a little donation for Until Freedom, it'll go a long way towards supporting work on the ground. So Aerica, yeah, like, I would love for you to kick off this conversation. I think we have just a lot of perspective, intelligence, like so much experience on the ground here, and would just kind of love to know how things are feeling in terms of that the conversation between art and activism currently?
Yeah, I wanted to get into a little bit because DC has been, I wanted to get into this a little bit because DC has been at the heart and the start, I think, in terms of the current protests of using art to amplify messages about the demands of Black Lives Matter, positively and problematically. This might be a little controversial, but I think it's important to discuss and acknowledge and get folks' take on Black Lives Matter Plaza and the response, the reasoning behind that, and the response, especially in light of, you know, as a symbolic gesture, I think it's quite powerful. But in terms of the demands, so many of them have not been met. And often there is an issue where it's kind of the easy thing, but also a necessary thing to a degree to make a public symbolic stand. But how do we follow that up with action? I think I'd love to hear from Trap, because your art actually inspires action and is grounded in that, as opposed to putting out art that then quells action. So I'd love to get into that.
Yeah, for me, you know, I'm aiming to bridge the gap between myself and my audience. And I don't expect everything from everyone. You know, I try to make work that can kind of bring us all together without alienating anybody. And that goes into even just me creating a lot of work surrounding aliens and UFOs and things like that, because I kind of want to take people out of their immediate comfort zone, and I guess just even the things that they associate themselves with, and give us a more global outlook on life, because I really believe that's the only way you actually care and want to make change. So yeah, I can't really speak on performative art, but I think it's a big deal to have a message that somebody can act on or just think on. And in that way, it brings the person in naturally. And from there, I think it creates a more sustainable fight for us, because that way we're fighting in everything we do. Again, from being out in the protests, supporting an artist that is fighting, supporting groups, sharing resources, things like that. And I think art will always kind of be the leader in that, because when we look back at these times, the history is shown through the art. And that goes back to even just a lot of things I've been realizing with these protests about how much of our history is just erased. And that's really been hard for me to really fully process now, and never really thought about that before in my life. So I'm even more bent on creating history through my work. So I've done projects where I've had to maybe use references from 1800s, just the old days when we didn't have cameras, things like that. And there's never Black people in those references. And we don't have any reflection of our history until slavery. So that's basically the only thing that's depicted, and it's depicted horribly. So with every piece I make, I want that to represent where we are and the mindset and what we want moving forward.
Totally. And I think there's also always room for change and improvement and progress, even in our institutions. And so then, speaking of that kind of tension, but also that negotiation of the performative versus the activist, I want to go to Kokayi a little bit to discuss his leadership and influence in the Grammy Award category changes.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I was part of a co-authoring group of Ivan Barrios and a cat named Chris McClinney, and we authored a proposal to change the urban category from best urban alternative performance to, I mean, not urban alternative, best urban R&B or urban performance to progressive R&B performance. You just understanding that the stigma behind the word urban, and even though there's still arguments here about that, whether or not urban is the right word to use. Are we removing Black people from Black spaces when we don't make a reference to Black people? I don't have any issue with the word Black. It's just that the way that the Recording Academy is set up is you can't introduce a name change that would have it go backwards. So we wanted to get rid of urban. It had been in the works for years before even Tyler said anything about it at the Grammy Awards, but it was wonderful that he said it because it brought that to the forefront of folks' minds. And we had actually voted on the name change 2 months ago at a May meeting to get rid of the term. And so it was before any of the stuff that came out from Republic or any of the other labels that were changing the urban name. But it was something that we felt was necessary. I think that's what you do with any organization. For me personally, I'm a subversive. I like to walk in buildings and kick people out of buildings. I like that. That works for me a lot. I could throw a brick at the building, but sometimes the institution needs to stand and the people need to get out. So that's what we tried to work on, was the opportunity to just go in there and make these progressive changes for Black music so that we aren't pigeonholed. And I think what happens for us is that with our categories, we are often, and just as a people, we are often open to people coming and joining us, but they aren't open to us joining them. So it's very hard to see Black people in pop categories. It's very hard seeing Black people in certain dance music categories. And so with the Black music, we normally keep those names so that we can protect our music, but we always let other people in, and people rarely let us in. So we just want to continue that fight into making sure that we are allowed agency to have a Tyler in a pop category, to make sure that Kate Trinata is recognized in the dance category, to, make sure that those persons, it's, for me, my opinion may suck to some people, and I really don't care. It's Black music. Rock music is Black music. R&B is Black music. Country is actually Black music. It was blues. And then when race records started, they decided to name it country because white people singing blues, if you called it blues, people would expect a Black person. But so you had to change it to country as opposed to just blues. So there's a lot of things that we started: jazz music, hip hop. The list goes on and on and on of these creations that come from this people, that come from this specific experiment, this crucible of Africans living in America, right? That become Black Americans, right? And then that adversely affected the entire diaspora of Black people.
Got you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think it's fantastic that, you, with the amount of work that you've done in your community and within your own body of work, that you can be at the table and be shifting these conversations to say exactly what you're saying. Like, the history of American music is Black expression, and the ways in which it's been co-opted and labeled so that it's white dominated, and that white supremacy can continue on in institutions such as the Grammys. Like, as much as it's easy to rail against it and be like, fuck the Grammys, we don't give a shit. Like, it's important to see cultural shifting happening inside of the institution. You as a Grammy nominated musician, somebody with vital connectivity to the culture. I think as a musician, it's hella important that you're at the table and making those shifts. So thank you so much for that. I know we had a couple more. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm saying we have to. Like, some tables, we got to take our seat. Like, it would be really easy to be like, fuck the Grammys. Like, that's one thing. But I'm like, nah, give me my seat. Like, stop playing. Like, I think that's where we are as Black people right now, even with any institution, Smithsonian, the art museums, the Met, radio, tech. Give us our seat. Give me my seat, man. Stop playing. Like, I think that's where we are right now. It's just we're making sure that we are speaking. And as far as like the Black Lives Matter mural, people could call it performative or whatever. I feel like it was the biggest troll from our mayor to the president. Right? We're going to put Black Lives Matter right on the street that leads up to your house, homie. And this is what we're going to do. And in order to make sure that message was corrected, is that people came along and put equals defund the police. That's the city speaking. That's the people speaking.
But
like
the reason why people, I'm sorry to cut you off. The people in DC, why they were mad though, is because like the mayor hasn't taken action for the people, for the Black men or Black people who've been killed in the city, for the same reasons. And it's like, so I think on one hand, because I feel the same, right? Like, I feel both ways. On one hand, I wanted to celebrate it, and I appreciated it because of what the visual, like, in how it made people feel. Like, that it was a nice feeling, but at the same time, it was like, damn, that really did kind of like, the way you mentioned before, like, kind of quell people's feelings as far as like not understanding locally that she's not being held accountable for the things that are happening in our city, because all we're talking about are George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, when really what each city needs to be doing is looking at the people who've had that happen to them locally, and everyone's not doing that necessarily.
Yes.
And I had a long conversation with Angela Bird, who does amazing in D&D, who's really good at chin checking people, just like in general. But that was her main gripe with it was like, where are we being holding her accountable for Daquan Young and for I think his name is Raphael Briscoe. Like those are two Black men who I believe were killed at the hands of police, and we haven't seen anything. She hasn't said anything about that, like what's being done. So I can't understand how, and just the fact that it led all these other cities to do the same thing. You know what I'm saying? Where it's like, now one popped up in Virginia Beach. There's one in Seattle. There's one wherever else. Like it's cool, but it's like, damn, like, are y'all putting up investigations on these officers who've done the same thing in your cities? Like you could get this mural approved quick, but y'all couldn't put that paperwork out. Y'all couldn't let us know that so I mean, I feel it on both, on one hand, because it was like a nice feeling, but it's like, damn, you don't want to get caught up in that nice feeling and then not remember that it's like we need to be focused on the issues,
Yeah, absolutely. I hear that in Seattle because we're here right now, and it's like one of those things where, the mayor is taking a picture in front of the Black Lives Matter mural, but we're not talking about Charlene Lyles, who was killed by cops 2 years ago, pregnant, and brutally. And I think that's a lot of that local accountability. People are like, oh, it's a national conversation. It's George Floyd. And it's like, no, it's happening everywhere locally. And how are we taking accountability for that? Kelcie, do you want to jump in?
Sure. The only thing that I would add is that when I first started, I was not excited at all. And I don't claim to be obviously a visual artist, but I'm a communicator. And I think that communication needs to be authentic. And I think as a Black woman, our mayor, again, doesn't have the liberty to want to join the conversation once it's on a national scale and it's corporately acceptable. I think that for years, the Black Lives Matter, specifically DC, has been trying to meet with her and have these conversations. And you're a Black woman, like, we don't have the luxury of waiting until something is cool or waiting until something is explained to us, because we know the experiences of our people, and this is a huge constituent group. And so when I saw it, I wasn't excited about it. And I did love that, you can't tell people how to celebrate and, how to grieve or how to join a movement. And so on one side, I'd never want to tell someone that they can't enjoy this moment. But on the other side, when they added a defund the police and took off the DC flag and made it equal, that was the Black Lives Matter DC movement telling her, this is not enough and this is performative for you. And we still need to have these real conversations. And so, I don't know, I wasn't excited about it. I do appreciate the troll, but I think that she needs to really tap into the work that people are doing here and stop being performative along with these other corporations, because that's not good enough.
Yeah, for sure. I hear that. Trap, did you want to add in on that as well?
Yeah, well, just touching off of that and highlighting the performative aspect of the Black Lives Matter mural, I did think in first seeing it, as much as we have the issues we deal with in our own community, it was bigger than DC, the message. So that part was exciting to me, just the scale of it. I mean, as an artist, like I said, I think art sends messages, and unfortunately, people don't always have the best intention behind it, but I do think that it did its part for what it could. But at the same time, I think a big factor that we have to really consider and be involved in moving forward is actually having people that we support and support us in power. And I think that's going to take a lot more education and focus on local politics, on issues that we're dealing with within our own communities, because I think if every community is focused on that all together as a country, we don't have a choice but to come together and to be solving these issues. So as much as the mayor was doing a performance with that piece, and we have a lot of issues with her, it just instills more the fact that we need to be more involved in local politics, and that we should have somebody who actually represents us and actually wants to make a change. So I think it comes in both sides. And that even goes to the community level of supporting each other. I, even as an artist, I think about, where I want to be and what kind of scale I want to be at. And as much as I want to get famous or whatever, it's more important about creating the spaces for us at those higher levels. And that goes to people in your own community, supporting those people in your community who actually stand for what you want, instead of following hypebeast culture and going after things that have no relation to you, don't care about you, which is a big reflection on what we're seeing with the looting. Look at Off-White, you're worried about these people that don't care about you. You're putting your money into them and furthering their platform when they're continuing to ignore you. And so I think it really comes down to the individual level that we are all actively supporting the groups that are doing the good work and the individuals who are creating, because we have all the talent we need, especially in DC, right in DC. So if we have every community really taking those small steps, that's when those, you know, that big art piece actually creates impact.
That's dope. Thank you all so much. I wish I could talk to you all for like 3 more hours about everything that's popping up. We did have a question from the audience. So New England Coffee Supply said, thank you so much for the art and the music you create. In good times and bad, we turn to art to comfort and inspire us. What can people do now to support artists so they can continue to thrive and create? So curious if any of the working artists in this panel want to kick that off.
I'll just touch in, like, to finish off what I was saying real quick. Again, you know, supporting the people in your community or the people that you actually have access to, the people that you see going in the community, having events, wanting to connect with people. I feel like those are the people you should be supporting. I think we should obviously buy Black, support our community, our people, and create that environment of local support.
Awesome. Domo, we'll kick it to you.
Well, I wanted to speak to the earlier point, so actually Kokayi can run.
Okay, got you. I'll come back to you.
So I was gonna say, you know, similar to what Trap said, is support your own. Like, support the people that you see out here. And if you are not a Black person, you're ancillary, you're an ally. What I would say is just utilize your platforms. If you have a larger platform than an artist that's on here, or anywhere within your community, offer that platform up. I mean, you don't have to be performative in that. All you have to do is just point somebody in that direction. If you know that you have ears out here, the people that are listening to you, point people in that direction. Personally, Domo knows personally, if I got any connects or whatever, you need some connects, I'm not a middleman. I will connect you directly. I don't care. Like, because I feel like it's best that we all have agency and an opportunity to be able to utilize these different institutions, especially the ones that are in DC, Kennedy Center, the Hirshhorn, Smithsonian Folkways, whoever's here, the Halcyon, anybody. If they're here and you need to connect, holler at me. I got you.
Awesome. That's dope. Kelcie, Aerica, you got anything you want to add into that?
In terms of supporting local artists and just creatives in general right now, I think they're so accessible. And I think it's really important to do your research, whether that's following any of us right now and just hitting us up and asking us who our resources are, who we're supporting to start you somewhere. I'm always online. That's my work. But it's so much information going around right now that is actually impacting and changing the world and changing this narrative. And I think we can get informed by just sharing what we know with one another and just asking questions. I love when it was voting day in DC, I did this post that was shared like 800 times about voting, and people texted me and asked me like, hey, who's running? Who should I vote for? I didn't even know today was election day. And I was doing the research for them. I was asking people who I knew were actively involved in politics and their war, and I just asked the questions. I love sharing that knowledge with people and helping people get active even when they don't know what's going on. So just stay informed and do some research.
That's awesome. Domo, did you want to?
Everyone.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Aerica.
Everyone said it so beautifully, but please start with following the folks here, following their work, and look for artists who are doing the same work in your own community, and like put your money where your mouth is, for sure. So buy local, buy Black.
Amen.
Awesome.
Amen.
So we're winding down, but Trap, did you want to add on to that in terms of how folks can better support artists?
Yeah, again, like we've all been discussing, supporting local, and just being more conscious in the way that you support people and who you're supporting, making sure that they're aligning with your values and that they are best representing themselves in the work that they do, doing your research, and just being involved in the arts community. I mean, I just truly believe art is always a positive way to get involved and to voice your opinion and to see how you feel. And again, like, Guerrilla, we're always sharing resources and highlighting creative women. So just even following platforms that do that so that you can continue to stay updated and learn. A lot of times, especially in DC, it's easy to kind of get lost in who to support and to find, what you're interested in and not be stuck in your immediate scene. So just, trying out different things. I know it's hard now with COVID, things aren't open, so you can't really go to events and meet new people, but a lot of people are doing online platforms just like this, having lives, and I think that's a great way to get introduced to new creatives.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Thank you guys so much
I
for
agree
sharing.
with that.
I do have one other thing
Yeah,
I would like to add. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Now. No.
No, I was just saying that I agree. I think that it really just is going to take a little bit of research. Everybody has to figure out what platforms are the best for them. Obviously, like ours is @Guerrilla.world, and we promote a lot of Black women and just women's things in general in terms of just issues that we're supporting, people we're supporting. So, we're obviously a resource, but you should definitely just do some searching. Twitter is a great place to just find some quick information, and then obviously like you can search on Instagram as well, but I would encourage people to find platforms that are run by Black people and that are in the space of the things that you want to be helping to support. But it is going to require some research. Like, we don't have any shortcuts for you, right? Like, everyone's going to say the same thing. Do some research, and not only just Black, but be aware of the other major entities where you spend your money. Like, we were just having a conversation, myself, Trap, and Kelcie yesterday about where I was going to go pick up some supplies for something we were doing because Home Depot, they support Trump. They have donated to Trump's campaign like year after year. And I was like, yeah, we can't go to Home Depot anymore. So until we find out something bad about Lowe's, that's where we're going, or like whatever the alternative is, even if it's an inconvenience, because this is a marathon, not a sprint. And if we really want to see the change that we talk about, like, it's going to require us to change our behaviors, even if it's not like always convenient. Because the Home Depot was a mile up the street. I had to go like 3 miles in the opposite direction to get to Lowe's. But it was just like, if that's gonna not support a Trump campaign, that's what I'll do. But it also means that maybe before you step into a major store, you do a quick little, let me check and see if there's an alternative. Is there a small business alternative? Is there a Black alternative? Do they donate to the wrong causes? Is that where my money is like helping go towards? If the answer is yes, then you need to like assess and change.
Yeah, I absolutely hear that. Like, yeah, inconveniencing yourself is like the least, especially for non-Black folks. Like, it's on us to inconvenience ourselves to ensure that we are spending our money in the most ethical way as we also try to dismantle capitalism. But thank you for that reminder, and the fact that like there's gonna be no shortcuts. There's gonna be no easy answers. Like, we just have to go do the work, research, and adapt accordingly. So
lastly, I was just gonna add in that people should mentor somebody. If you have a larger platform and you have a larger audience, or you're an expert in your field, put somebody under your wing. Trap was talking about how she didn't have resources or people that was ready to mentor her in the way that, and how to put her art out, and having these things. I think when you provide mentorship to somebody who may not be where you are, you also give them access and agency to be where you are.
Dope. All right, y'all. Well, we're gonna wrap this a bit, but I'm curious if anybody has any closing remarks. If y'all want to shout out how upcoming projects that y'all are working on. Yeah, go ahead, Domo.
Girl is chilling right now. We have a project that we're probably going to revive for next year, so I'm not ready to put that out there yet. We're going to keep it under wraps until then. But what I would encourage people to do is, and somebody can probably put this in the live comments, to hit up progressive.cf. It has a listing per state of all the progressive congressional candidates who are still in the running for November. I would just encourage people to check out those people in your states respectively. It's funny because DC does not have any representation, which is really why it's important for us that people have representatives across the country that can really make the change happen that we keep talking about. So that was one resource that I found recently while I was trying to research what to do in Maryland and Virginia specifically, because we still have a few candidates and we really did drop the ball not bolstering people before the primaries, but I think that we can still get ahead of the November election. So I just wanted to put that resource out there for people. It's progressive.cf. And it's again per state, the congressional progressive candidates that are in, whatever various districts for you to like go and research to figure out like how you can support them. And whether that's volunteering, donating, sharing on social, like, get involved.
Awesome. Dope. Anybody else want to, any last things to leave our audience with? Yep, Erica.
What Domo said, and also suggest the Collective PAC, which is a progressive political action committee for progressive Black candidates around the country. And they fundraise for all Black progressive candidates. And then get involved in your city's budget conversation. I think we've seen a lot in the media about LA's, locally in DC's, but get involved regularly and push your council member to really promote in your city budgets what's best for your community. And that includes the arts, because every year the arts get cut out of budgets. And so the cities need to hear from people that they care about creatives and they care about the arts and they care about where their money goes, including defunding the police.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Erica. Yeah, Kokayi?
There's also a fund for Black women called the Ashi Fund, THEASHE Fund, and it funds all Black women creatives. So you can donate to them via donor box. And yeah, you can find them on IG at the Ashi Fund or theashifund.com. Thanks.
Awesome. Dope. Cool. Any last words, Trap? Or
support art and support your community. That's really my big takeaway.
I would just add, I'm like just in the comm space, just keep sharing what you're finding, keep amplifying the work, because the digital space, maybe the front lines are not for you, are really changing the narrative and really creating impact, and it's easy to do. So just stay involved and stay engaged and just keep sharing what you're learning.
Awesome. Dope. Well, thank you all so much. It was such a pleasure to be able to share space and resources and history and knowledge. Like, I'm still like, I can't wait to go back and re-listen to Domo and Kokayi, what you guys were talking about with go-go music, and research more about that. And just in deep gratitude for each of you for the ways in which you are utilizing your creative skills and your organizing capacities to come together to express, and to shift our society. We need it more than ever, and DC is such a beacon of change, obviously not just on the government side of things, but with culture, and y'all are at the forefront doing that, and so I'm really thankful. So yeah, just if please everybody peep these people's art and their music and their profiles, stay following, stay supporting, and yeah, I need to do the Venmo add up, but we've definitely had a few $100s come through in support for Until Freedom. So thank you all so much for all the audience folks that tuned in and supported these artists. And yeah, tap in. And yeah, and with that, I'm very grateful for all of y'all. Girl World, Kokayi, Aerica Shimizu, we appreciate y'all. Have a wonderful rest of your Sunday.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.